Today, let's talk about remakes, and let's talk about why we shouldn't care if a movie does get remade. I certainly don't myself, and why it is whenever you do a search on the greatest remakes ever made, you see the same titles over and over and over. If you've ever gone online and done a search for what are the greatest remakes ever made, or what are the top 10 best Hollywood remakes, or whatever, you're going to get the same titles over and over and over again. You'll see The Thing, you'll see The Fly, you'll see Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You'll see the same titles again and again and again. And there's an obvious reason for that. Those are great remakes. So I get it. I understand why those titles are there. But another reason they're there, just to be a little blunt about it, is because many of the movie media publications that are running these lists are written by people who, well, to put it mildly, don't know shit about movies. Seriously, when Screen Rant or BuzzFeed or some editor working for media outlets like that says, Thompson, I want a clickbait article on remakes. And then Thompson, whoever Thompson is, they go to Google and they're like, best remakes ever. And they get, The Fly and The Thing and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And they turn their article in and they get their clickbait. Because they're not really aware of any remakes outside of the ones that come up when they do that search. Now, the other thing about remakes is how testy some people get when a movie is remade. I, for one, couldn't give a shit less. If you want to remake Citizen Kane, freaking remake it. I don't care. You want to remake Casablanca? You want to remake Chinatown, The Godfather? Remake them. Go crazy. Have fun. See what happens. There was a time when Psycho was being remade and people freaked the fuck out. Like they freaked out. Oh my God, he's remaking Psycho? Yeah, who cares? Who gives a shit? The original Psycho's right there. It didn't do anything to that. So, whatever. Remake it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you'll get it right. Like John Carpenter did with The Thing. And maybe you'll totally screw it up. I don't care either way, and I don't understand why there are so many film fans and cinephiles and film buffs who are so agitated over the idea of a movie getting remade. Who freaking cares? But the thing that irritates me even more is seeing the same titles over and over and over again. So I'd like to give you 5 alternate remake titles as kind of an antidote to those same old titles that you're seeing all the time when you search for remakes. These may not be the greatest by your standards or by somebody else's or their favorites, but they're 5 of my favorites, and I think they're all pretty damn good. We'll get the ball rolling with the 1946 classic, The Postman Always Rings Twice. Directed by Tay Garnett and starring John Garfield and Lana Turner, the movie is regarded as a film noir classic, and it is. And so, when Bob Rafelson, who had worked with Jack Nicholson several times before, most notably on 5 Easy Pieces, decided to remake it with David Mamet writing the screenplay, it was considered just, crazy. Oh my God, we're remaking The Postman Always Rings Twice. Now, the movie wasn't well received at the time, the remake, and there's a good reason for that. The critics didn't know what the fuck they were looking at. What the movie unfortunately became famous for upon its release were 3 things. 1, Lana Turner calling it trash, people speculating if they were seeing Jack Nicholson's belt or his wee-wee, and the fact that the movie's title wasn't explained. I'm not making up any one of those 3 things. That was an actual criticism of the remake was, hey, they didn't explain the title. Who cares? Does anyone explain the title in The Big Chill? The other thing was a sex scene in which it's not clear if that's Jack Nicholson's belt dangling or something else. And then, of course, there was Lana Turner, the star of the original, calling it trash. Here's the thing. John Garfield was a terrific actor, but Jack Nicholson just does it about 1 billion times better. And Jessica Lange completely outshines Lana Turner. She and Nicholson are terrific. It is gritty. It is passionate. It is exactly what the story demands. And it has grown in reputation since. I highly recommend checking it out. Next up, Bedtime Story, remade as Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. One of the reasons you probably don't see Dirty Rotten Scoundrels on a lot of these remake lists is that reason I talked about earlier. The writers for those outlets not really knowing much about movies. They probably would look at Dirty Rotten Scoundrels and say, well, that's a remake? It's a remake of Bedtime Story with David Niven and Marlon Brando. Yeah. Marlon Brando. And I know what you're thinking. Well, if it had Marlon Brando, then the remake Dirty Rotten Scoundrels play a really loose adaptation, and you'd be wrong. No, it's like a scene by scene remake. Like Marlon Brando is Ruprecht, the Monkey Boy. I kid you not. Marlon Brando had a fantastic sense of comic timing. He had terrific comedy skills, and they just didn't get used as much as they should have been used during his career, unfortunately. That said, Steve Martin is a million times better. And that's saying a lot because, again, we're talking about Marlon Brando here. But Steve Martin is absolutely fantastic in the role of Freddy, the small-time con man that's played by Brando in the original. And Michael Caine is also just a couple of miles above David Niven, who, again, that's quite a statement to make because David Niven was a great actor and a great comedic talent. So even with all that talent in the original, to me, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels far outshines it as a remake. Now, my third choice is kind of strange because it's not a movie remake. It's a made-for-television remake, and it's a miniseries. And oddly enough, for a list that only has 5 movies on it, this is the second one adapted from a James Cain novel. The movie is Mildred Pierce. Now, the original with Joan Crawford and directed by Michael Curtiz is absolutely masterful. In fact, it's the one movie on this list that I would definitely hold above the remake, but I'm still including the remake on this list because I think it is such a good adaptation of the source novel that it deserves to be on here. And it does a really great job of it. In fact, I'd really recommend watching them back to back. The noir first and the miniseries second. Number 2, a remake of an adaptation of a book, of a history, of an event. It's all over the place. Now, we all know that in history there actually was a bounty that was mutinied. That was all written down and recorded and retold. And then they started making plays and movies out of it. The Wake of the Bounty with Errol Flynn, I think that was 1933. But most famously, 1935 gave us Mutiny on the Bounty with Charles Laughton and Clark Gable. Now that is the version that most people think of when they think of the story of the Mutiny on the Bounty. Then there's the remake of that remake, if that is a remake, because Wake of the Bounty was made before that, so that could be the remake itself. And then the remake of that remake was with Trevor Howard and Marlon Brando, 1962. But the original 1935 version with Charles Laughton and Clark Gable, that's the version that most people think about, where you've got the monstrous Captain Bligh and the heroic Fletcher Christian, which, by the way, Charles Laughton does a terrific job as Bligh. Gable is very entertaining as Fletcher Christian, and possibly more entertaining because he makes absolutely no attempt whatsoever to be British. I serve His Majesty the King. Of course you do, Clark. That said, in 1984, there finally was another version after David Lean had struggled for years to adapt his own version and finally giving up on it. And in 1984 was finally taken over by Roger Donaldson. It starred Anthony Hopkins as Bligh and Mel Gibson as Fletcher Christian. And again, as I've said so many times in the course of this video, you're talking about actors outdoing other actors who were already great. Charles Laughton really is just one of the greatest actors out there, and there is simply no doubt in my mind that Anthony Hopkins nails the role of Bligh so well that I'd be hard-pressed to believe anyone making another version could ever do a better job. But more importantly, Mel Gibson, in 1984, despite that being so early in his career, I would still say it's his best performance ever. He is exactly what you would expect Fletcher Christian to be. By the time that mutiny occurs, Mel Gibson's Fletcher Christian seems psychotic. He seems like he's having a breakdown. He seems like he has lost his senses. And that is exactly the state of mind you would assume someone would be in to take a ship away from its captain. Anthony Hopkins also does the amazing job at that point of really getting your sympathy by having Bligh have to basically explain to Christian and the mutineers what he's been doing, which is, I'm just trying to bring discipline to a ship. And then later, when Christian is taking the mutineers to what will eventually be their destination, Pitcairn Island, and basically having to stave off mutiny himself and realizing the mistakes he's made, it really comes full circle, where by the end of the movie, if anything, Christian is the villain and Bligh is the hero. I highly recommend The Bounty, which is, in my opinion, the best of all Mutiny on the Bounty movies. And now my choice for number one is not only a masterpiece remake of a masterpiece, but my own personal choice for my favorite remake of all time, period. William Friedkin's Sorcerer. In 1977, William Friedkin set out to remake what was widely considered a masterpiece of world cinema. The 1953 dramatic thriller The Wages Affair, written and directed by Henri-Georges Clouzot and starring Yves Montand. And it is a masterpiece. So right there, we're going back to my original statement of go ahead and remake anything you want and let's see what happens. Because if William Friedkin had said to himself, no, I can't remake that movie, it's a masterpiece, no one's ever complained about Clouzot getting it wrong, I should just let it lay and I should do another movie, then we wouldn't have gotten Sorcerer. The primary difference in the remake, in Sorcerer from the original, is that you not only have a main character, which is Yves Montand in the original and Roy Scheider in the remake, but you have the other characters also given backstories. And those backstories start the film. It starts with their backstories. And then, well into the movie, we finally get to the jungle where they've all disappeared to out of desperation. And now, in further desperation, just need to get some money to get the hell back out. One of the amazing things about both Wages of Fear and Sorcerer are the scenes with the trucks that are done completely practically. In the original, probably the scene with the oil pool that the trucks have to go through is an amazing sequence, and again, amazing because it's just real and it's there, and you're like, holy freaking crap, they had to do this? And in Sorcerer, it's crossing that bridge that appears to be held together by twigs and really strong termites. And you're thinking to yourself, how did they shoot this? How did they not just crap their pants every time they had to get on that truck and get on that bridge? It also totally beats the original with its ending, which I'm not going to spoil or anything, but suffice it to say, neither movie ends well. Neither movie has a happy ending. But the unhappy ending of Wages of Fear is a self-imposed unhappy ending, which, when you do see it, you'll understand what that means. The unhappy ending of Sorcerer is an absolute gut punch. It comes from the outside, and the main character has no control over it. So that's my alternate list for the greatest remakes ever made, so that you won't always have to recite The Thing, The Fly, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and so on. There are other remakes out there, and there's plenty more than what I just did. I mean, one of the things I was trying to stick to with this was doing remakes of movies that were already well-known and highly regarded in their own right, which is why I didn't do, say, the 1941 remake Maltese Falcon, because the original just isn't that highly regarded. The remake, Maltese Falcon 1941, is. So I kind of left that one off. But you get the idea. There are tons of remakes out there of movies that were considered great, that are themselves great. So we should stop listing the same remakes over and over and over, because there's a lot more to explore in the world of cinema. And two, if you're a film fan, stop freaking out when a movie's going to get remade. Even if it's your favorite, even if it's a classic, even if it's one of the greatest movies of all time, it's okay. Let them remake it, see what happens. Until then, take care of yourself. Please give a like and subscribe, and drive safely.